Today we're going to be replacing an iPhone 11 screen here. The first thing that we're going to want to do is test the current screen to make sure that there are no software bugs on the actual phone itself. So I'm going to take an app here and I'm just going to drag it around. That way you can see that the screen is working just fine. Then the second thing that we're going to want to do is just test the camera. So I'm going to open up the camera app here and you can see that the camera is in fact working. So now that we've tested the camera, the next thing we want to do is turn the device off. You can do that by holding the power and one of the volume keys, and then you just slide to power off. And from here, what you're going to want to do is you are going to want to separate the screen. But the first thing you need to do is remove the pentalobe screws on the bottom next to the charging port. So take your time with these. You don't want to strip them. Most screen replacement kits come with a pentalobe screwdriver, so that screwdriver that comes with your kit is probably that. This process took a lot longer than it usually does. This screen was super stubborn. You can see I'm going in there with the suction cup to try and pry or pull the screen away from the frame. And then I have these little cards to separate the adhesive. So I went back with a heat gun and I heated up the display to try and loosen up that adhesive. If you don't have a heat gun, then you can also use a hair dryer. You're just going to need to spend a lot more time than you would think. And you can see I barely got any sort of give there at the bottom. So what I would do is I came back with another one of those super thin pry tools and I got underneath the screen and just pried ever so gently and then went around the sides to try and cut that adhesive. Again, go really slowly. You want to be very careful with this to make sure that you're cutting just the adhesive. So here you can see that I'm folding it out to the right. Had to cut a little bit more adhesive on the screen there. From here, you're going to want to get your tri-point screwdriver. I think this is a 000 tri-point screwdriver, and you're going to want to remove these 5 screws around this metal bracket. And you're going to want to keep good track of these because the screws inside the iPhone aren't all the same size. But after you've removed these screws, they're very, very tiny, by the way. After you've removed these screws, you just remove this metal bracket right here. The next thing we want to do is remove the battery, which I believe is this cable right here. Nope, I was wrong. It is this cable right here. You just want to disconnect the battery to make sure nothing shorts out. So we're going to disconnect that right there, kind of pull it a little bit to the side. And now we want to disconnect these other two that connect the screen. That first cable I disconnected is the front facing camera and it controls the Face ID. So once you've done that, you can separate the screen entirely from the rest of the iPhone. Now what we want to do is we have this adhesive all around the side of the iPhone. What I like to do is I like to kind of stab it with some tweezers and then I just roll the tweezers and that helps me get a lot of the adhesive off without breaking any of the adhesive. So I'm going to speed this up to show you once all the adhesive is removed. But you're going to want to take your time here and remove all of the adhesive. All right, now that we've got all of the adhesive done, we're going to want to take a look at the broken screen again. Now we need to remove that front-facing camera and sort of the sensor that allows you to do Face ID, and that is this assembly right here. So you'll notice there are 4 screws, 2 on the right, 2 on the left. There's a really, really tiny one on the left. But once you're able to get that screw out, you're going to want to flip the display over and you're going to want to heat the front of the display. And that's because in addition to these screws holding down the front camera and the Face ID sensor, there's also some adhesive sticking the bracket that holds it down in place and you want to remove that. So I heated up the display ever so slightly just to get it warm and loosen up that adhesive, and then you use some tweezers and you're able to pry this out. Be very, very gentle with this. If you break this, there's really no going back because these are paired with the iPhone. So you want to be as careful as possible. I've botched a couple of repairs this way where I'm just not careful enough removing this display. I probably should have heated it up even more to remove it, but this one turned out okay. So you can see that I'm really taking my time trying to weasel this sensor out of there, and that's what you're going to want to do is take your time with it. And once you've done that, you've done the hard part, to be totally honest. Everything else is really easy compared to this, because essentially what you're doing is you're doing everything in the reverse. And so now you can see that here's that sensor and that front camera system. And what we want to do is we just want to put that into the new display. So I have the new display here, and you can see it's got that bracket that'll hold it in place. Again, that tiny screw is the hardest one. It is just such a pain to deal with. And so you take your time with that, make sure you can get it in there. And once you got it in there, you're all good to go. You can take the other 3 screws with that Phillips double 0 head screwdriver. From there, you can connect the display just to those same connectors, and you can then also connect the battery. I should point out that these connectors you have to be very gentle with, because they have these connector pins that are very easy to bend and break if you're too rough. So you do want to push hard enough to actually, get the connector to go inside, but you don't want to push too hard that you might bend or break the pins, which would subsequently also break the actual screen. From here, what you actually want to do before you glue down the assembly is boot the phone up, because it would be a bummer to completely reconnect the phone, get everything put back, and then find out that the display doesn't work. So we're going to test the screen here. You can see that Apple does recognize that it's not an official Apple display. However, on the iPhone 11 model, that's not actually an issue. It's only once you get into the 13 and 14 and 15 models that you start to have issues with the screen itself. So you can see that the apps work just fine. The camera works just fine on this one. So this display is going to be okay. So I'm going to power it back down. And now I'm going to place something right behind the screen so I can lift it up. And I'm going to put that bracket that goes over all the connectors back on. Once you've put the bracket back on, then all you need to do is glue down the display. Now, a lot of these aftermarket displays come with adhesive as part of the replacement kit, and those do work okay. The only issue with them is that you have to put the adhesive on entirely before you put the screen on, and so it can really be a hassle to put the screen on, test it, make sure it works, and then you take the screen off, then you put the adhesive on, then you put the screen back on, and you put it down. And sometimes the adhesive doesn't hold super well. So what I'm going to use here instead is just some electronics glue, and that's going to allow me to leave the screen attached after I've put the bracket on, and after I've tested it, I don't mess with anything, and I just put this around the perimeter, and that allows me to put the screen down without having to remove it again to put the adhesive on it. So that's what I'm doing here, and then after that, you just want to put the screen down. This can be a little bit tricky because it is a very, very snug fit. And so I had to lift it up and put it down a couple of times to make sure that it slots in. You should put the right side in first and the top in, and then push down the bottom and the left sides to make it clip in the right way, and usually that will do the trick. This one was just a little bit tricky. And then after that, you go ahead and you replace the pentalobe screws into the bottom of the actual device. And then you're going to want to just make sure that you let the glue set for as long as possible. It should be okay. It's, like I said, it's a really tight fit. It's also being held down by some glue and then also the pentalobe screws as well. So it should be fine, and you could just use it, but I'm going to go ahead and put these clamps on there just for good measure. That way we can let the glue cure for as long as possible before using it. But there you have it. That's how to replace an Apple iPhone 11 phone screen. Let me know if you have any comments or any questions in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next one.